if you want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
The assassination attempt against former US President Donald Trump is the single biggest news item ahead of a bitterly contested presidential election. And this murder bid, instead of trying to unite America at a moment of a terrible tragedy like this one, seems more likely to tear apart America even further. Within minutes of the shooting, the air was filled with anger, bitterness, suspicion, and an overwhelming feeling of revenge among Trump supporters. Fingers were pointed, conspiracy theories were put forth, and a country that was already deeply divided is even more fractured now. The shooting on Saturday night was just 2 days before Republicans were all set to gather in Milwaukee, Wisconsin for their once-in-4 years convention, which would put the stamp of approval on Donald Trump as the official nominee of the Grand Old Party. Republicans, right after the shooting, have instantly blamed President Joe Biden and his allies for the attack on the former president. They argue that the level of political violence actually stemmed from the incendiary language labeling the former President Trump as a neo-fascist who's out to destroy democracy. They even point to some statements made by Biden allies saying that 2024 would be the last election if Trump were to come to office. Biden had even recently said that he wants to put Trump in the bull's eye, and his only strategy against Trump come November is to attack. Trump supporters say that is code for the Democrats and the Democrat voter base to take a shot at Trump. Either way, this incident could fuel Trump's narrative about being the victim of persecution by the Democrat-led establishment. Donald Trump was impeached, he was indicted, and convicted by a court of law, but now he can legitimately claim that the Democrats would go to any length to stop him from running for office, even put up someone to take a shot at him. After being wounded at the rally, Donald Trump, with a blood-stained face, pumped his fist at the crowd and he shouted what appeared to be the words, "Fight, fight, fight." The crowds in return chanted back, "USA, USA, USA." This could be the defining image of election 2024. The shooting came at a time when the United States was already deeply polarized along ideological, cultural, and partisan lines. It is split into almost two countries, even two realities, if you will. More than at any other time in modern political history, Americans today do not see themselves as a collective union of red states and blue states, but people who are at polar ideological opposites on what sort of country they want America to be. The divisions have grown so stark that a poll back in May found that 47% of Americans, that's almost a majority, considered that a second civil war is likely to happen in their lifetime. It is the stuff that would have only been confined to the imaginations of Hollywood movie makers, but it is very much now America's reality. Events lately have led many people to compare 2024 to 1968, which was a year of great turmoil in America. It was a year of racial riots. There were clashes in major cities across the country, and of course the assassinations of human rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, who was at that time a presidential candidate. Protests over the Vietnam War back then had prompted the then President Lyndon Johnson to drop out of the race for his re-election. This year too, there have been growing calls on President Biden to step out of the race and make way for a younger candidate. But this assassination attempt on Donald Trump, his main challenger, will tamp down the pressure on Biden. No Democrat, particularly one who is in his 50s or 60s, who sees a future for themselves, will want to take on Trump now, particularly after the assassination attempt. There is going to be a surge in the polling on the back of both this murder bid against Trump and also the Republican National Convention, which will formally endorse him as the Republican candidate. Not since President Abraham Lincoln was shot dead by a Confederate sympathizer has an assassination attempt against a sitting president or a former president so sharply exacerbated America's political divide. Lincoln was not the only sitting president who was assassinated. Presidents James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy were also shot to death by lone gunmen. In those instances, those gunmen, those assassins, were upset with those presidents for some reason or the other. But those killings did not become outright clashes between Republicans and Democrats. The same was true with the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. The last time a US president was targeted in an assassination attempt was in 1981, when Ronald Reagan was attacked by a man when he was walking back to his car after a speech in Washington. But then the entire country rallied around the president, including Democrats. Reagan won the re-election in 1984, and by the end of his presidency, there was the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of communism in Eastern Europe. In fact, Reagan's presidency set the stage for the collapse of the USSR. In recent years, political violence in America has become increasingly partisan. Representative Gabrielle Giffords, Democrat of Arizona, was critically wounded in a mass shooting in 2011. Representative Steve Scalise of Louisiana, who's now the Republican majority leader, he was shot and injured during a congressional baseball game in 2017. The assassin happened to be a supporter of Senator Bernie Sanders. An armed man was arrested outside the home of Justice Brett Kavanaugh in 2022. The suspect told the authorities that he wanted to kill the conservative Supreme Court justice because of his positions against abortion and gun control. And later that year, a man wielding a hammer broke into the house of Nancy Pelosi, who was then the Democratic Speaker of the House, and beat her husband, Paul Pelosi. The most famous recent case of political violence was the attack on Capitol Hill on the 6th of January 2021 by supporters of Donald Trump. They were trying to block the certification of Joe Biden's 2020 election victory. The Capitol Police have investigated more than 8,000 cases related to the insurrection of January 6th. But these cases have not led to soul searching in America. It's not unified people across political divides. Instead, it has ended up in more political blame game. The assassination attempt on Donald Trump, I'm afraid, will likely have the same resultant effect, and that is the political divides in America and the blame game between Democrats and Republicans will only get further accentuated before it gets any better, if at all it will.